Okay, where were we? We were muting and unmuting. I was just saying thank you for welcoming me to your wonderful space. I was just remembering the last time we saw each other, I think was a few years. It was in Tabor Space, if memory serves. So it's good to see you again. And we have little interactions here and there on the email and on the Facebook, of course, but so does everyone at that point. Okay. So thanks for that, and everyone, of course, for being here. And these obviously are very trying times. And when the subject came through to me intuitively, which was finding calm in the storm, I pretty much said I'd like to sign up for that too, because I was having some challenges, I think like all of us are, perhaps intermittently, perhaps consistently. So I'm going to share with you some tools on how to maintain the good sense of self when there's so much going around us. And it's not just little things going on. There are some really big things going on. For anyone listening later, it's late September 2020. We're in the midst of a COVID epidemic, pandemic actually, and Black Lives Matter, and so many issues are really coming up, ideally for healing, with the election about 6 weeks away, a lot of tension around that. So it's important to recognize what we can do and what we can't do given who we are. So I'm going to share some tools to help us maintain our sense of self. And my typical work is with empaths and highly sensitive persons, and I'll share how that happened or how that transformed into that in a moment. Like Teresa said, I am a best-selling author. Um, have 3 books, 2 of which were bestsellers. The last one's called Empathopedia, which is sort of like my, I don't know, piece de resistance, perhaps. I'm guessing another one will be written afterwards, but it combines a lot of experience working with empaths and highly sensitive persons and gives tangible tools. So I'm going to give some of those tools to you to hear today. And I'm going to try to make this reasonably experiential, not just me talking the whole time. I understand how, no matter what anyone's saying, sometimes the mind is just going to go, what's for dinner? And that's okay. So if you notice your mind going to that place, just honor it. It's totally okay, and then bring yourself back whenever you can. Kind of like a meditation where you're thinking of not thinking. It's really not going to work. But if we embrace that thought that's going by, kind of like a cloud, well, there's a nice cloud, and there goes a nice cloud. We don't spend a lot of time saying where'd that cloud go, or trying to find it once again. We just invite the next cloud in. So take care of yourselves today. Hopefully it'll be fun and experiential, and hopefully somewhat educational. So I'm just going to share a little bit about how I got into the work specifically with empaths and highly sensitive persons. Um, First, I had no plans of doing such. I can't imagine I'm the only one in this room that had plans made for them that they didn't know about until they actually manifested. I was living in New York for the first 45 years of my life, and I thought I was doing pretty well. I lectured with Deepak Chopra. My first book was a bestseller. I had wonderful friends and family, and Spirit said it's time to move west. And I, of course, like any New Yorker, said no. And within about 2 months, I was living on the West Coast. So this is just a reminder, try not to fight with Spirit. If you can help it, you will lose, okay? But even though I might have lost that particular, I don't know what the phrase is, battle versus war. It sounds kind of violent, but you get the idea that that particular thing, in the moment, maybe I can look at it and joke and say I lost that, but actually I won, because when I got out here, I realized this is where I belong. This is more my pace. I met my wife while I was out here. Life has been very, very different and really better on all respects, except for missing some of my close family members. Some moved away, so they moved before I did. So I'm gonna put that on them. Anyway, so I was in Portland for a bit, and I really didn't know a lot of people. And one person that I knew said, invited me to their friend's birthday party. And me being new in town, really not knowing a lot of people, I figured it'd be a great time to meet everyone. And what I didn't realize until I got there was that it was one of those party bus tours. And I really hadn't drank pretty much since college. So it was very, it was a very different experience. And at the end of the evening, most of the people that were there, it was 7 bars in 7 hours. So it was a bit toxic for my tender system. Um, but I didn't really know how toxic it was because I checked out. In other words, I would sort of be living out here in the ethers in these challenging environments, or at least what I consider challenging environments, where people are getting drunk and sometimes um, irate or irritated or whatever happens in bars. I don't remember. It's been so long. Anyway, the point is, at the end of the night, I went to hail a cab, and I basically sounded something like this. And of course, in my head, I'm hearing the word taxi, but in my ears, I'm hearing my voice outside stuttering this word. And I thought that was kind of odd. Then I started walking a little bit outside this last bar and started walking a little funny. And I said, wow, I feel like I'm drunk. I, I didn't drink anything but water the entire night. How could that be? Finally got in a cab. Fortunately, that sign is universal and the word is really secondary. And interestingly, in the moment where most people don't have clarity, which is after imbibing a lot of alcohol or energetic alcohol, as I did, Spirit gave me the message loud and clear. This is what I've been trying to tell you. You're an empath. And I didn't really want to own it at that time. I'm not really sure exactly why. Perhaps my first experience with that word was from the show Star Trek. There was an episode actually called The Empath in the original series. Just by show of hands, anyone actually remember that episode? Awesome. Okay. And it was about this woman who could heal other people after absorbing other people's pain first. And she would just go through this very brief process where she would take on pain from someone who was hurting. She would feel it for a moment and transmute it, and then it would leave her body. And she did it a few times, and after several times, she was really spent. And little did I know that this was the message that I'd be teaching 40 years later, that we need to take care of ourselves primarily. Doesn't mean at the expense of anyone else, but to take care of ourselves. And the end results of not doing such will mean that we're spent, or that we'll be dealing with some pain or illness, and we'll go deeper into that in a moment. So I had to really begin to understand what it was to be an empath. Now, fortunately, I was very intuitive, and I was able to intuit things for my clients who basically changed overnight. I was more traditional medical intuitive, if you will. It sounds like an oxymoron in itself, but people would call and or do sessions with me in my office in New York, and I would hear things like, "Oh, your back pain is from anger at your dad," for example. And now I was hearing things like, "You're holding your dad's anger." Very, very different. I would hear, "You're holding your mom's grief. You're holding the grief of the collective unconscious. You're holding on to X, Y, and Z from this person, that person, or many persons." And of course, my question, just like my client's question, was, okay, what do I do with that now? So I began tuning in a little bit deeper, and I was able to intuit some steps for healing those particular ailments in a way that really works for empaths and highly sensitive persons. And I just want to share before we go into that a little bit deeper is that I believe everyone is at least somewhat empathic. I think we're all born that way. I think we're all born with a knowingness that we're connected to everyone else. Things happen in our lives that decrease our awareness of that. So even if you're listening and you don't think you're empathic or highly sensitive or even moderately uh, above norm, whatever that is, in sensitivity, open to the possibility that it's in there and that at some point something that I shared today will resonate with that part of you and perhaps will give you an aha moment or two or three or a dozen. So uh, I was able to intuit some steps, not just for healing, but also for prevention. And this brings us more to today's topic. We want to be able to still be empathic, sensitive, heart-centered, nurturing, and caring people. If you're on this call, I'm just going to assume that you are. But sometimes those skills get us in trouble, in meaning that we either overdo it or don't do it in the best possible way, and we become drained. We become walking sponges for everyone else's energy. So maybe just by a show of hands, being that we're all on mute, about a little less than half of you are on video, How many of you can resonate with being, if I can be casual for a moment, being a walking sponge where you take things on and you're moderately to very aware of that? Pretty much everyone, and a couple of thumbs up on the people that are not on video. So thank you for that. So I hope this resonates with you, and if it doesn't, let that be okay as well. At some point, we all just plant seeds here and there, and at some point they grow or they don't, and that's totally okay. Either way, I appreciate you being here. I'm going to say one other thing before going into the heart and soul of it is, don't believe anything I say. So why do I say that? Well, because I'm only coming from my own experience. I'm also coming from the experience of the people I've worked with, which are literally in the multiple thousands at this point, of persons who are are empathic and are highly sensitive. So I like to think I have some idea, but at the same time, I'm far from know-it-all, and I'm open to learning more. And I can knock wood and be in a place of extreme gratitude. I've been able to help so many people, including myself, because as a lot of us know, we teach what we need to learn, and hopefully we do it well enough to be able to share it, to have someone else, shift something for the positive. And sometimes just knowing that you're not alone can be the biggest thing. That's actually one of the most common emails I get is, thank you for writing your book. I know now that I'm not alone. And that always gets my heart. I mean, I love hearing things that people healed X, Y, or Z pain, illness that they've had for decades, and that's fantastic. But for me personally, what really gets my heart is when someone says, thank you for writing that book. I now know I'm not alone. It just really brings something up very deeply within me. And I can feel in the room that some of you might resonate with that as well. So thank you for sharing that energetic aspect of yourselves. I'm an empath, and I'm going to pick up on what you're what you're sending. Okay, but I'm not going to keep what you're sending. And in a very short period of time, you'll know how to do that as well. So we're going to talk about prevention first. If you think about it, any decent energy worker or even physical body worker can move enough energy where you'll feel a little bit better or a lot better after working with them. And that's wonderful. What I saw, and partly because my dad was a pharmacist, and the nature of pharmacology, even though good intentioned for the most part, trying to help people feel better, often is burying the causative aspects. So it's not really cause-based much of the time. I can't say all the time, of course. And it allowed me to it spurred me, it catalyzed me to go deeper into all the practices that I've learned, and there are numerous. What's the cause? And if I can get to that and potentially educate someone on how to work with that, then I'm really empowering them. And to me, that's really exciting as well. I'm not excited by people needing to, I mean, if you need it, you need it. I get it. No judgments, but I like to be able to give people enough information and an experience to recognize that this is something positive. Now, of course, to go much deeper than we can on our own, we do require other people. We do require a safe space. I think a lot of you know that already, but it's just so important that I really feel it's worth mentioning. If without being held by, in my experience, another human who can hold the space of unconditional love, it's very difficult to access those deeper layers of causality, usually because they're pretty traumatic. Even if, all things relatively speaking, they might seem minor, as a child, it might have been experienced as traumatic. And these memories will stay in our body, creating blockages leading to pain and illness. We'll go more into that a little bit later, maybe. But for now, let's open to the possibility that all the healing is great, but without quality preventative tips and tools that you do use, you can't just read about them or hear about them. Don't let your mind play games with you. You have to do them. Kind of like brushing your teeth, right? You're not going to get the benefit without doing it, even though you know you should be doing it, even though you know what it's going to feel like. Don't let the mind think this is the same. These are tools that we have to practice regularly to have an outstanding life. I can speak firsthand that when I do my own tools, I have an amazing life, amazing day. I can manifest pretty much anything. I have no pains and illness. I'm 56 years old. I fall asleep right away. I always have energy. I can hike for miles and be fine. Um, these things work, but your experience is more important than anything I say. So that said, if we understand that we're walking sponges and that we don't need to be, and have steps and tools we can use to prevent ourselves from being a sponge and still be empathic and sensitive, who would be excited by that? Just raise your hands. Okay, if you're not, you can leave the call now. Just kidding. All right. Another thumbs up. Thank you, Nancy, for that. I love that. Thank you, Norma, for checking in. She put her video on just for that. Thank you so much. So prevention. We want to be working in alignment with our gifts. And I get how being sensitive might not seem like a gift, but that's someone else's reality that I'm going to invite you to drop by stepping into a new reality that says, sensitivity is my superpower, and I'm going to use it because it's what I was gifted by the Creator with. Now, all gifts need to be fine-tuned. So I'm not going to tell you to stop being sensitive. I'm not going to tell you this is going to take decades to master. I'm going to tell you we just need a little bit of a fine-tuning through a mental understanding and a physical embodiment experience that allows energy to work through us enough that we can still be connecting to people, but not be a sponge. So we're going to be more of a funnel with a filter on it as opposed to a sponge. If you think about it energetically, this is night and day. I understand that a lot of people do blocking practices, and if that works for you, fine, go for it. What I was able to feel was that, imagine just putting your arms out like this all day long. This is what the blocking type of experience is doing, whether that's calling in specific archangels or energies, or putting up a wall or a mirror or a glass shield, putting yourself in a bubble. They're all blocking. And energetically, that goes against our gift, which is the ability to connect with people on a deep level. And I get some people you might not want to connect with. And if you need to wall off, do what you have to do. But I'm also going to give you another tool that, in my experience, more than 9 times out of 10 is going to be more effective. I call this the keyhole. This is just the name that came to me, partially perhaps because it sort of is a key to living better. And it also has this idea of space, like a keyhole that you can look through and see through that space into what's happening in the adjacent room. So it's 4 micro steps added up to this one larger step. I'm going to recommend that you do them rather than write them down, because that's the way your body learns. They are in my book, which you can get. You can get the ebook for less than $5. Even the paperback is less than $13. So it's not a lot of money to get the full written out. But for this moment, I'm going to recommend that you just do what's there. That way, it becomes embodied rather than just a mental idea. Okay, there's a much deeper learning in that way. And to bring it even deeper, we're going to incorporate specific senses. The more senses you use in any learning, the better chance it becomes embodied. How do we know this? Well, there's a great example. How many of you have ever heard a song on the radio that you hadn't heard in 20, 30, maybe more years, and you remember every word of the song, right? You remember how you felt when you heard it. You may remember where you were or who you were with when you heard that song, right? Some people call those musical aha moments or epiphanies or whatever it is. It's in the body. So it's not just floating around the mind with all those rambling thoughts. So what we're going to do is incorporate movement, breath, visualization, vocalization, hearing, and vibration. So these are 6 senses that you're typically not using when you're just thinking of something. So theoretically, you could say it's 6 times more powerful. It's hard to quantify. It might be 2, it might be 20. Whatever it is, it's more powerful than not, okay? So just try it on and you'll see. And even in just a few minutes, most of you, I think, are going to feel something very different. So you'll see how powerful this is, even without someone right in front of you, perhaps sending you energy that you don't want to take on. So let's do the first step. So for those that do yoga, it's an exaggerated cow-cat move. If you don't do yoga, I'm just going to explain, so it's totally fine. Now I'm going to put my hands on my shoulders here so you can get a visual of the movement. You don't need to, but if you want to, it's absolutely fine. Okay, so the first movement is very gentle, expanding the chest, exposing the heart energy. And then the exact opposite, which is closing off the chest and expanding the upper back. Let's try that again, just to embody it. Expose the front of the body. And then we're going to expose the back body by contracting the front. Super simple, right? The next step is breath, conscious breath. We all breathe all the time, obviously, anyway, but conscious breath is very different. What we're going to do is try to feel the breath come into the lungs, the front of the body. In fact, if you want to, if you touch your collarbone, that's the bone that goes right about here. Let's just say it's 6 inches wide. It's going to be different for everyone. Or 6 long. It's going to be different for everyone, obviously. Right in the middle and down just a tiny bit, there'll be a little bit of an indentation. In Chinese medicine, this is called lung 1. This is a pressure point to use for vitality, to open up the lung meridian. So I like to picture the lungs, the breath coming into those lung meridian points and or into the lungs themselves, whichever way feels right for you. And then what we're going to do as we expand the back, we're going to imagine and try to feel the breath coming out the back of the lungs. So what we're doing is creating an opening. We're creating space for that energy to flow through, just enough for you to feel what's there, because again, that's our superpower, but not so much that you become a walking sponge. Very slight difference, but very powerful end result. So let's try it together. Breathing in as you expand the front of the body, and hold the breath just briefly, and just notice the quality of the breath, and then expand the upper back and let the breath go out the back of the lungs, creating space. Right? Quantum physics has proven we're mostly space. Let's make use of it. Try it again. Expand the front of the body. Breathing in, hold the breath briefly, just notice the quality of it, and expand the upper back, letting everything go out the upper back. Wonderful. The next step is a visualization. We're going to do all these together. We're going to imagine there's a white light coming into the heart chakra. I don't know if you can see that, but you know where your heart chakra is, and if you don't, just assume you can't go wrong here. Even if you're off by quite a bit, it'll still be fine. We're going to imagine the white light coming into the heart chakra along with the breath. So now we're opening 3 channels of energy, right? And opening the back, same 3 channels, opposite side, again, creating even more of a flow. Okay, so let's try that together. Expand the front of the body, breathing into the lungs, visualizing white light coming into the heart. And if you're not good at visualizing, it's totally okay, just pretend. And now expand the upper back, letting everything go out the upper back, letting everything out. Wonderful, let's try it one more time. Breathing in, expanding the front of the body, breath in, light in, hold, and just notice the quality of it. Try not to change it, make it wrong. That's not going to serve you. Gently letting it all out the upper back. Wonderful. The very last step is the mantra. We'll do a repeat after me so you'll remember it and be able to embody it as opposed to writing it down. And we'll try it together. So what we're going to do with this mantra is really state to the universe, I'm done being a sponge. It's not serving me any longer. It may have served me when I was younger. It may have been a way that I got love. It may have been a way that I got attention. It may have been a way that I give love. And none of that's wrong. None of it's bad. But it is our past and potentially not serving us any longer, especially now because there's so much grief and fear and anxiousness in the collective unconscious that we're taking those things on without even knowing about it. You might be feeling those things, and it might not even be your feelings that you're taking on. And it can be really overwhelming, and this could be a way through that. So the mantra is keep what's meant for me, let go what's not. So again, we'll do a repeat after me, and you'll see exactly what it is. So, and you'll feel it more importantly. So that's why I said don't write it down, just feel it. It'll be a lot more beneficial, I think. So let's try it together. So I'm going to ask everyone to do is breathing in, let the energy come in, expand the front of the body, hold, and then repeat after me out loud, please. Keep what's meant for me, And a long, slow exhale. Let go what's not. At the end of the exhale, let go what's not out loud. This is where the mute is kind of a bummer. It's pretty awesome when everyone's saying it together, but we're all sensitive. We can feel each other. So let's try it again. Big expansion in the front of the body. Bring breath coming in, energy coming into the middle. Hold it all. Enjoy it. And repeat after me, please. Keep what's meant for me. Wonderful. Long, slow exhale. Let everything out the upper back as you're leaning forward, and repeat after me. Let go what's not. Wonderful. Now just take a moment to feel into your body. Bring your awareness inward. Does it feel even a little bit different? Maybe just by a show of hands. Okay, so pretty much everyone on the video has agreed. Mary Lansing has joined us. Hello, Mary. So good to see you. So that's the keyhole. I mentioned earlier about the vibration and the hearing. I just want to touch upon that briefly. When we speak things out loud, it creates a vibration in your throat. So it's another sense that's happening that is not just a mental thing. And you're actually hearing it differently because your voice is different on the outside of your body than it is on the inside. I had a vocal teacher teach me that, and I didn't believe her, but if you've ever listened to yourself back on tape and said, is that what I sound like? The answer is yes, that's what you sound like. And if you want to try it, this is kind of fun. Maybe not right now, but go up to a wall, push your ears outward, right? Or forward, I guess, and speak to the wall. And the voice that you're hearing come back from the wall is going to be somewhat, if not interestingly, different than it is in your own head. So even that little difference creates something different and additional to the thought, which is what a lot of mantras can be, is just a mental thing or affirmations. And those are fine, nothing against that, but why not add more energy to it, right? I think we all know that the universe works with energy and intention. We can intend something, but if we don't actually do something, we don't actually move the energy to make it happen, it's probably not going to happen, or it might take just much, much longer. So with this practice, we're working on being more of a empathic funnel with a filter rather than a sponge. Now, of course, the next question is, how am I going to do this walking down the street? Or assuming someday we get through this COVID situation, can I stand up in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner and say, keep what's meant for me, let go what's not? Teresa would do it. We know that. Okay, but most of us might not want to do that. So what do? Think about this like learning a language. The more you practice on your own, the easier it's going to be to have a conversation with someone who is fluent in that language as well. So the more you practice this, the more embodied it becomes, so that when you do go into those situations, you can just call upon that energy or even do a really tiny version. Like you probably can't even see my shoulders moving right now. It's such an imperceptible movement, and yet I just did a keyhole exercise. Okay, so you want to practice this. And what's another way of knowing it's going to get in your body? Well, or getting it into your body through repetition. Just like any habit, it's formed through repetition. So when I first heard this, the recommended time, bear with me, is 2 to 3 times a day, 10 to 15 minutes each time, which adds up to 30 to 45 minutes. And I totally understand that some of you might have said, there's no way I'm going to do this for 30 to 45 minutes. And I can tell you, I don't even think I've ever done it that long. But it is interesting to think about, what would my life look like if I did do that? And maybe that's an incentive enough. At minimum, just a few minutes a day can make a pretty big difference in your life experience. From some people do a morning, afternoon, and evening practice. Some people are into numbers. How many of you are into numbers? You see a clock that says 4:44, like it gets your attention, right? Let that get your attention and remind you, can I do my keyhole right now, even just a minute or two, just to practice getting it into my body, so that way when I do meet people in person, eventually, hopefully I'll be able to do that. But even through things like Zoom and social media, we are taking energy on from other people. And especially with social media where people tend to vent, you're taking on all that energy as well. So it's really important to be super conscious of this and get it from mind into body and practice it enough that you can have this sort of in the body, an embodied experience, as opposed to even needing to think about it. So does that make sense for everyone so far? Cool. We'll have some time for question and answer later. But for now, we're just going to move forward with this. So this is just one way of preventing incoming pain and illness. So what I'm hearing to talk about now, there are other preventative tools, but I'm not hearing to go into them right now. Maybe we'll later. I'm here to talk about how do we heal energy that's been absorbed. Well, this keyhole is more for prevention, although for some of you, it might have shaken some things up, kind of like the snow globes. I think a lot of us might remember those things. You shake them up and watch them fall. Like kids today would have no idea what to do with that, but as a kid, I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. I can do it for a couple of hours, not get tired of it. For some of you, doing that keyhole is like shaking up the snow globe. You might loosen something up, and that could catalyze the healing process, but mostly, in my experience at least, it's used for prevention. And I'm hearing to touch upon one other thing, because I think I'm hearing some of your questions, which is if it doesn't feel comfortable to use your heart space, totally okay. You can use your solar plexus, you can use your throat, you can use anything. Someone actually asked me once, can I have it come in through the top of my head and out through my feet? Absolutely. You just want to be aware of movement. Sometimes we want to guard the heart, and if that's where you are, great. We don't want to take that energy, and even for a microsecond, totally fine. We do want to work on being more translucent, I think is the right word, where we're not such a sponge. So if you are not excited by using the heart chakra, that's totally fine. Just play with it, use different things. You'll find what works for you. And of course, you can change the mantra to something of your own as well. I don't have a trademark on it or anything like that, although maybe I should have, but that's kind of silly. Okay, so how do we heal what's been absorbed? Well, first thing we need to do is understand that most pain and illness, and I think a lot of you are going to resonate with this, and again, in my experience, like we said earlier, don't believe anything I say unless it resonates. Most, or at least a lot of pain and illness are from repressed energies and emotions. And it just kind of makes sense, right? If there's a lot of grief in our life and we don't have the space and don't go through the grieving process, we're going to get ailments that are aligned with repressed grief. These things have been documented in Chinese medicine for 5,000 years. Typically, they're going to land in the lungs, the large intestine, and the secondary and tertiary, et cetera, are skin, eyes, and ears. And if you think about, and sinus problems as well. So if you think about like the sinus, if you have infection or sinus headaches, well, your tear ducts are right underneath there. So it totally makes sense that if you're not grieving, you're creating a blockage there, and that can give you that sinus headache. How do I know this? Well, not just because of Chinese medicine, because everyone I've ever worked with who has a blockage there and we're able to clear that block doesn't have the headache anymore. It's really basic, almost hardcore science in that respect. And, Western medicine might not agree, and that's fine. There is a place for Western medicine. I'm not against it. I'm not against pharmacology. I'm all for whatever works for you, given what you need to accomplish in that moment. So on an energetic standpoint, when we're dealing with things like repressed grief, we're going to get ailments like that. If it's repressed anger, for example, sometimes we feel in the heart. It really can be anywhere. I've seen grief anywhere in the body, and if not everywhere. And that should make sense too, but Chinese medicine has documented it to be those areas particularly, but I don't think they meant only those areas. As a medical intuitive, I can tell you could be holding it in your toes. Don't even know why. Sometimes if that's where it is, that's how we work with it. So it makes sense that if it's your energy and your repression of grief, if we stay with that example, that's causing any ache or pain that you're having, well, it makes sense then to go through the grieving process, again, ideally in a safe container, because it's very difficult to access those layers on your own for most people. What do we do when it's someone else's grief? What do we do when our family was dealing with depression while we were growing up? Or societal grief, of which currently there is a tremendous amount, and again, for obvious reasons, considering all the things that are going on. Well, first thing we do before healing it is understand the following. And this is if this is the only thing you take from this entire talk, I'm going to be ecstatic, which is the following. Grieving is your body's natural, innate process for handling and healing any kind of loss. Think about that for a second. Grieving is how your body handles loss. You can almost say it's like the immune system for your emotions. To me, it is that important. And unfortunately, most of us were taught when we were very young, it's not safe to cry. How do I know this to be true? It's been pretty much universal with everyone I've ever worked with. So we judge those things that were not supported. We judge the expression of grief. We judge the expression of anger. When in and of themselves, these energies are very human, very raw, and very real. And if we're judging those emotions as part of us, and they are part of us, then we're actually judging ourselves. So we're attacking ourselves, if you will. I think it was Dr. Bernie Siegel pointed out years back that he said, one of the things about HIV was there was this mindset that was more common than not of self-attack, self-criticism, and that actually manifested, in addition to the physical virus, obviously, manifested in the illness because the immune system was weakened by all this self-criticism. And what happened with HIV was that it was attacking itself, right? It was attacking the immune system. So it's a really interesting way of looking at it, and hearing from a medical doctor was really interesting for me, at least as a, an alternative practitioner who works purely on intuition and experience, of course. So we want to begin to welcome these energies and realize that they're actually a positive thing and a healing thing. Am I making sense so far? Because this is really key. If you're not on board with that, that's okay. Just kind of take it in for a moment and think about it later. But I think as you go along, you'll start seeing how important it is. So if we're holding the grief of, let's just use the example of the collective unconscious, probably because I think all of us are at this point. Well, what do we do with that? We give it back to them. Of course, the next question is how. We'll go into that. But even before that, the question of why should I? Why can't I transmute it for them? Well, very simply, because it's not your job. If it was your job to hold everything from the collective unconscious, that would be or over responsibility or misperception of true responsibility that is weakening you and bringing you down and potentially weakening your energetic fields and fields of defense and immune system, and everything really can be affected by that. So in a way, I like to look at this as a gift. I'm giving this grief back to the collective, and I'm helping them be more whole. Because if I'm holding something from someone else, whether we judge it as positive or negative, then I'm dealing with their, what I would call their soul path or their soul lesson, right? This is true on an individual level as well. We're going to talk about mostly the collective today, but just try on that. This is true for the individual. If you're holding energy from someone else, how can they walk their path? Now, it doesn't mean to not be compassionate. It's just the opposite. It means to be compassionate and loving better than you used to be, which means caring for the self as well. That expression, you can't pour tea from an empty teapot. Or like we spoke earlier about the empath from the Star Trek episode, wiping herself out to a point of total exhaustion. How often can you do that without losing your gift or losing the ability to use the gift well? So we all have these gifts. So there's a process for giving that energy back to the collective. Again, a lot of the success of that is based on our deep understanding and embodiment of the idea that grief is a positive thing. When we give it back to someone, they're more whole. When we give it back to the collective, it's more whole. And those who need to deal with it will eventually deal with it. Have enough trust in the universe versus our own fears or desires to be the superhero, the super healer. Have enough trust in the universe that it goes to where it needs to go when we take the steps to make it happen, right? And I'm actually here and we're going to do this. So we're going to do this as a group. So it'll give you a chance to really try it on and really feel it. And sometimes and sort of like the keyhole, even in just a few minutes, you can have a very different experience in your body. Most people will feel lighter, more open, more peaceful, more calm. And if we're looking for calm amongst this storm, so that we can then we can both be healthy and help out others without being drained, I think it's a win-win-win. Okay, so I'm gonna actually take you through this process, and I'm just gonna invite you to do the best you can. Um, I'm gonna give you a quick analogy if I can at first. Um, if you have something, let's just say a 100-pound rock, and you need to move it from spot A to spot Z. Well, typically, most of us, most people, maybe I could be wrong, but most people I know can't lift a 100-pound rock very easily. So what would we do? Well, we can't hire someone. What if we can chip away pieces of that rock and make it easier to move? My point is trying to not to get caught up in the idea that you're going to move all the things that you've ever absorbed from the collective back to them in this one few minute exercise. That if you can move even 5%, again, hard to quantify, but just for conversation purposes, if we can move even 5% of everything you've ever been holding from the collective, would that be a positive thing that you'd be excited about doing? Awesome. Okay. Well, now we get to do it. Okay. So again, just do your best. Try not to get caught up in, am I doing it right? Sometimes the effects are very subtle and sometimes we feel them later, but just go through the process. As long as it makes sense and you're open to trying it, I think only good things can happen. Okay. I'm going to ask everyone to take a few deep breaths. If you want to close your eyes, I think I might as well. Begin to bring yourself into the present moment by acknowledging, opening to the possibility that one or many of your blockages do not belong to you. Rather, they belong to the collective unconscious. And open to the possibility that if you give it back to them, they'll deal with it as they need to, because they'll be more whole and will have an opportunity to do so, and you will feel lighter. Just try on that thought process for a moment, and then we'll do it. I'm going to ask everyone to imagine themselves speaking to a large group of people, whether that's 20 or 200, let that be okay. And if you're not good at imagining things, just feel into the safe container that's being co-created by all of us here today and spirit. And maybe allow that vision to come, or that feeling if you're more of a visceral person. Let that sense come that you're speaking to a large group of people. And if there's any fear of public speaking, we're going to take it one step deeper. We're going to imagine their higher selves. So we're not necessarily looking at their physical bodies per se, although if that's what shows up, that's fine. We want to take it one step deeper into the higher selves or the spiritual essence, call it what you will. And we're going to have a conversation with this collective higher self. Again, just do the best you can. I'm going to ask everyone to repeat after me. I'm going to ask you to try to feel the words and the concept rather than just saying it because Dave says it's a good idea. Really want to invite you to feel. That's where the healing happens. Healing, there is a wonderful benefit to mental healing and talk therapy. We're just doing things a little bit differently that in my experience is really powerful for empaths and sensitives, which is embodiment. And nothing wrong with any practice that's out there. If it works for you, great. So I'm going to ask you to do is repeat the following to this collective. I, and then insert your name, I'm aware that I'm holding your collective grief. Again, please just do it rather than write it down. I promise you it will be embodied and a much deeper, more powerful experience if you're willing to try that on. I'm aware that I'm holding your collective grief. I'm also aware that it doesn't serve me to do so. Maybe you can try that one more time. I'm also aware it doesn't serve me to do so. And I'm aware it doesn't serve any of you. I'm aware it doesn't serve any of you because you need what you came here for. You need what you came here for. This is you talking to this collective unconscious higher selves. And toss in there very gently. It was never mine to carry. Feel the energy of that. It was never mine to carry. Wonderful. Now I'm going to ask you to ask them for permission to send back to them what's theirs. Now, if your mind just said, why do I need permission? Just try it on, please. We could talk about that later. I'd like you to ask for permission to send back to them what's theirs. Now, I'm going to assume that you got a yes. If you got a no, we'll talk about that later. But I'm going to assume, I'm feeling in that at least most of you got a yes because you're open to this possibility, at least just trying it on. What I'd like you to do is open the front of your body very gently, relax and breathe. And what you want to do is allow, not force, not push, not pull. Why? Because those things add more tension to your body, and tension is what got you in trouble to begin with. So we want to allow that energy to flow. Just like you open up a water faucet, you don't need to do anything, you open it. So if you want, you can turn a valve by the heart chakra, by your solar plexus, whatever feels right, or just open the shoulders and allow the energy to flow from you to them. I want you to stay with it for a couple of minutes. Remember, even if we just do a small percentage of what's there, it's still, I think, pretty awesome. Just breathe and allow the energy to flow from you to them. And while it's happening, if you're visual, you'll be able to see how they respond to that. If you're visceral, you might be able to feel it, or you might feel in your own body something shifting. So please stay with that just for a few more moments. Keep breathing and allowing that energy to flow. If it feels complete, just stay with it. Maybe give yourself a gentle hug, honor yourself for doing that process. If it's still in process, let that continue. It's totally fine. For some of us, there's a lot there. It might feel like 100 pounds. It might feel like a 100-pound rock. Just keep breathing and allowing. If your mind drifts, just bring it back. I'm allowing that energy to flow from me to the collective. And begin noticing how you're feeling. Maybe you're in resistance. That's okay. It's not wrong or bad. We can talk about that later, perhaps. But for those that were able to feel that transfer, that shift in your body, that visceral shift, not a casual give it back to the universe who knows what to do. There's something to that. To me, this is a little bit more deep because you're taking responsibility and stepping up into a different way of being. Good. So slowly begin to bring yourselves back. I'm going to ask if anybody would like to share their experience, what they felt. Maybe if you can do an individual unmute, that would be wonderful. Okay, it looks like Val has her mute off. Did you want to check in?
Yes.
Awesome,
yes.
please.
There's, I pictured a crowd of 6,000 in a huge auditorium, and 75 or 80% yes. And what's niggling at me now is that there are always the people around you that want to make their emotional problems your fault, the guilters, the blamers.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you look happy, but I just want to check in. How does it feel having given that energy back, even if it was 75, 80%, which is still pretty great? Or to 75, 80% of them, more accurately.
Yeah, I don't know yet. Still short
Okay.
of breath, but
Okay, fair enough. Okay. It's okay not to know. In general, if it feels more positive than negative, or at least you're hopeful and inspired, I'm fine with that. Okay. Thank you. Anybody else like to share? Norma and someone else whose name I don't have, so we'll just go with Norma first if you want to share. Love
Well,
to hear
it
from you.
affirms that I am taking on the grief, and I've been reacting to it, but I didn't know how to name it or do anything about it, and it does feel very heavy. And I've had some experiences of giving it back without asking, but I like that idea also. So
Great.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Bring a lot of good energy here. ML?
It was interesting. It was like a multi-tiered auditorium, so there were people on different levels. And it seemed like most of them, some of them were even happy to get the grief back, to take it, to do their own work with it, that they had needed somebody else to carry it for a time. I mean, it felt like they couldn't face it to begin with. And they seemed to go, okay, I'm ready. And it was just, it was good. It felt like there was a lot of energetic movement going out, and it seemed very peaceful too. So
Wonderful.
yeah, I really appreciate being able to do that, because I hadn't realized how much of it. I realized I was taking some of the grief on from other people, but I didn't realize how much. This was huge. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, beautiful. Sam?
Very interesting. I saw the group in front of me, and I sent them back their grief, and they all kind of rubbed it off themselves. Like they don't want it. I don't know what that means.
Well, they had their experience with it, and they can do what they need to. They can do what they need to once they have it. Some will do that, and some will take it on. But it's important that, like ML said, we are part of the process of helping them in a way that helps ourselves as well. This is one of the big lessons that I had to learn, certainly, was to honor myself in addition to everyone else. And I think, a few of you are nodding, so I think that's potentially universal, certainly for empaths and sensitive. So thank you for playing along. Awesome. Okay. Anyone else? Teresa?
Well, I turned off my video because I wanted to stand up and see if that I could feel it more fully, because I don't think I'm always the person who feels everything like some other people do. But anyway, nevertheless, I had participated. I really felt like there was some sort of release there. And then at the end, I felt I needed to say to everybody, thank you.
Mm.
And then I said, I love you to everybody, which is not like me. Anyways, so that was my experience. It was fun.
Wonderful, thank you.
It felt good.
Yeah, and of course, as I think all of us know, but maybe forget too much, well, I'll speak for myself, I forget. Energy of gratitude, thinking one of the highest vibrations out there, anytime we can be in that place. And to see a group like that, be in that place for something that we've done, I just think it's a wonderful win-win situation. So thanks for sharing that. Anyone else before we move forward? Totally fine if not. Okay, cool. We'll go into question and answer in a little bit. I just want to address a couple of things on that I didn't do prior to. And one of which one of you mentioned specifically was about asking for permission. And the question is like, why do we need to do that? Of course it's theirs. Well, in my experience, and if I or anyone was to give you, let's just say 5 steps for a guaranteed 100% wonderful, amazing, perfect, whatever that means for you, life, my guess is that many of us were going to say, can I do it in 4? Kind of like the name of that tune, right? How many notes or whatever that was. It's just part of the way that mind works. We like to use shortcuts, and I'm not opposed to them, but when they hinder the process, that I am opposed to them. And I'm also going to share one more thing which is going to help, I think, expand on why that's so important. Again, in my experience, the universe, our souls, spirit, my belief is that they want us to learn even more than heal. Ironically, learning can lead and often will lead to the healing. But if we're chasing healing, well, we all know when we try to chase a romantic partner, for example, that wasn't interested, that they run. Or if they come too aggressively towards us, we run, right? So there's this push-pull dynamic that we have to be conscious of. If we're chasing healing, sometimes we're actually pushing it away. And if we're not conscious of what is this pain, illness about, how can we possibly heal on a deep level, right? So this is true with a headache to even more advanced diseases. Kind of like if a car has a little warning light on the dashboard, you want to know what specifically is wrong with the engine so you can then fix it, right? You don't just pull the wire out or turn the bulb off or just stop looking at it. It's a warning sign. And I think that all pain and illness are warning signs, or at least gentle reminders, maybe it's a nicer way of putting it, that something we're doing is not in alignment with our own true nature or our best selves. And for many of the people I work with, what it is the following. We've put other people ahead of ourselves to our own detriment due to an overblown sense of responsibility that we learn typically as children. When does that happen? Well, I'll give just a quick example, because obviously for everyone it's going to be different, but again, it is a commonality that I've seen. But when it was shown to me in the following way, which was when you're even an infant, if you do something, let's just say you giggle, what does everyone in the room do when a baby giggles? Typically we giggle, right? And if a baby cries, there's another reaction happening there. So the baby's mind can start coming up with this linear capacity that says what I do affects everyone else in the room. And if we take it to another degree, we can actually start saying, not consciously, of course, but in some way, I'm responsible for the energy, the thoughts, emotions, and experiences of other people. Just think about that for a moment. And if that energy stays with us, we'll do things as children to get or give love. That's all kids want to do, obviously. Now, if we do something that gives us that sense that we're being helpful to a parent or a sibling, we're typically going to do more of it. And especially if they say, oh, you're so cute, or you're so cute when you giggle, or whatever it is, we use different tools to cope with our situation, to learn how to navigate the world. And a lot of us have learned over responsibility. And clearly that can't be helpful. If we're feeling responsible for what's in the collective unconscious, clearly we cannot heal that so directly. We can do our part, absolutely, which a lot of us just did. But I'd also like to toss this out, that if there's roughly 7 billion people on the planet right now, when we do our work, we are taking care of our 1/7 billionth of that collective, right? And sometimes that's all we can do. What's really cool is our personal freedom and liberation will unconsciously liberate others. And you'll find different people coming to you depending on where you are vibrationally. What you're sending out is going to send out a different signal. So even if you're not a healer, quote unquote, you are, because of who you're being. And if who you're being is loving and caring and nurturing, you're a healer. And we want to fine tune that so that you're not overwhelmed by it, but just to be able to do enough that you can, and some would say you should be doing. I know we don't want to shit on ourselves, that whole thing about shouldn't, we don't need to get into that in too much detail, but if we really feel and say, what is my conscious response to what's happening, and really intuit even deeper, and I do this at a lot of the individual, actually group work that I do, we create the space to have this information arise within us as a group, to create an information of what I can do in response to what's happening to COVID or to this protest. And some of us feel physically limited. We can't do it, or we're not well and can't do it. Well, that doesn't mean that you can't donate. It doesn't mean that you can't organize things online. And if that's not your thing, something is your thing. But it's important to think that we all do what we can, given our skill set in relationship to what's happening, from a place of conscious response rather than unconscious over responsibility, or what I would call your pattern. Energetically, they're night and day, even if the actual physical movement is the same. So when something is in alignment with your soul, you're going to feel more aligned, more open, calmer, more connected, and more helpful. And if you're using these tools, these are just a few that I'm talking about, the rest are in the book, then you can have a very different experience while you're doing what you're doing. Does that make sense to everyone? Just a quick show of hands. Cool. I remember putting that in a newsletter recently, and someone wrote back, thank you so much for this message, because I think she said she was 87 and unable to go to the march, even though she felt she wanted to, that perhaps if it was a few years prior or whatever, that she certainly would have, so she felt guilty. Well, her guilt is not helping the collective, right? I'm not judging it, I'm just pointing out. And she felt very freed by this idea that she can do different things that can also be part of healing. Healing isn't only what everyone else tends to think it is, right? We all have to do our part to have a better experience as individuals and the collective on the planet at this time. So I'm actually hearing that's enough, Dave, talk in that one way regard anyway, for now at least, that I'd love to open the floor for questions or concerns, potentially readings if that feels right, if you want that. Probably not going to take anyone through specific healing processes, but I might be able to give you enough information that you might have an idea of where to work or how to work, or just general. You can ask how you doing. That's legit also. So no question is a wrong question, and we'll just go with that to see where it goes. I don't know what's going to happen. I didn't know what was going to happen when I first got on the call either. So let's go with it. So anyone feel an urge to check in? Yes, Norma, first one to have her hand up. I think you're on mute still. Still not hearing you.
Unmute yourself, Norma.
Okay. I need my tears, and I'm dried up, and I visualize, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could just weep when with all this grief that I'm recognizing now and letting it out. But I want my tears, but actually have my tears, and I'm dried up. And I was thinking, why? That's my question. Where are my tears?
Okay. Fair question. Thank you. Well, they're there. They're not flowing because of old understandings, because of old judgments that are not even your doing. In other words, and this is true for many people, whether it manifests in less tears or no tears, please know you're not alone. At some point, you were taught that crying is not healthy, sexy, fill in the adjective, right? Or you were taught to judge that grief, and unfortunately, this society is right on board with that. This, media especially, would rather see someone torturing someone else than someone crying. So anger is somehow more welcome than tears. Ironically, or not, tears are often underneath anger. But for yourself, learning to embrace that sadness would be a really wonderful place to start, or continue, depending wherever you are. And I think this question is for a lot of us, actually. So thank you for asking it even more so, because I feel like a lot of people are kind of on board with this. What we're taught to judge, we're naturally going to repress, because as children, if we do express what's not welcomed, we can get hit, we can get made fun of, people cut off love. I mean, think about that. That's pretty horrible, right? A parent cutting off love to a child for a child being wonderfully human and expressive. But that's what they learned. So you and many of us have this lineage, and through practice, learning to embrace that sadness, I think, is going to be your ticket to freedom. Make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. See, it's there. See, we can feel the sadness in you right now. It's so beautiful. Thank you for showing that. Even if it doesn't show up in tears, it's totally fine.
Oh, I might have a tear. I feel it up here. Oh my gosh.
There you go. A chest tear. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, you're making me cry. But I embrace my tears, mostly. I can't say I'm there 100%. I'm not gonna, but I'm much more than I've ever been. And how lucky am I that I have a wife that understands this as well. Not just because she's attended many of my lectures, but so she'll hold the space for me to have my sadness, as I do for her as well. And I do this for my clients all the time. When we had the physicals, I mean, I still have the physical office, but when it was operating before COVID, I still remember someone came in not too long ago, and they just sat down and just looked at me, and I didn't even know them, and they didn't know me, I don't think. And she just looked at me and just started bawling. And I just thought it was the most beautiful thing, because it was just so vulnerable and so trusting that we didn't have to do anything to build up that trust. It was just there, and she let it out, and she felt so much better afterwards, and we worked with it in different ways. So I welcome it fully, and God bless your chest here. Okay. Awesome. Sam, did you have your hand up?
Yeah. I'm gonna make an analogy. I'm also an HSP, by the way, highly sensitive. Okay, let's just visualize, let me visualize President Trump saying, you are a Democrat. Not only do you need to suffer, you need to be crucified for what you think and feel. So that's essentially a person that is not giving me permission to give him his. How do I deal with that?
Well, this might sound sarcastic, and it's been not meant to be, but he's not next to you right now, right? In your home, you can have any experience you need to, and I think it's important to have that experience, regardless of what others think, especially those that aren't even in your physical proximity, right? On a bigger picture, that might be a fear of being judged, that might be coming up for healing for yourself, right? So we want to ideally empower ourselves with personal responsibility. Who am I in response to what's happening? Because most of us, I imagine, do not have the ability or connections to change, in this case, this individual, to change them. And we have to be okay with that, right? We might not like it, but we have to be okay with it and work with it. So my invitation is to own what's true for you and work within you, and letting go of what other people think of you, which I know is not easy for many of us. What's that phrase? What other people think of me is none of my business. Right? It's hard. I'm not saying it's easy, but if it was easy, everyone would have done it already. So we're still here on this planet. That means we have stuff to learn and work out. And that sounds like it's something coming up for yourself. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. ML.
When you talked about the things that happen, when we're children, and the baby, giggling, and everybody giggles too, and I realized how deeply that spoke to me in terms of my sense of responsibility and sort of taking care of everybody in my life, trying to make nice,
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
How does one go about, because I know I'm not alone in this, how does one go about kind of letting go of some of that? What's just some of these exercises? Is there another step of some sort to?
Sure. There's always something to do. Okay.
Yeah.
Might not know it until I tune in, but there's always something we can do. I just real quick before I zone out, because I tend to forget. Someone wrote in the chat room that she came in late. She wanted more information. My website is my name, davemarkowitz.com. You can get the book there. In fact, I actually just ordered some more books. I sell it for less than that famous online retail giant, and I will actually sign it and make a personalized message intuited just for you. So I just wanted to address that before the chat room gets too busy, and that's all there. So ML, so how do we embrace that? Well, you said two words there that I think are, I'm going to say, somewhat misunderstood in sort of the new age metaphysical communities. Let go, right? Oftentimes we hear just let go of that as if it's like a shirt you can just take off of yourself. To me, if something is yours to deal with it, there is no letting go, meaning it needs to be integrated, which is a very different energy than let go. In fact, if you think about it, the energy of let go to me is very judgmental. I don't want this part of me, so I'm going to get rid of it. Well, what's the energy of getting rid of? It's anti, right? It's contradictory and negative. Yeah. So when we begin to embrace those parts of ourselves that we don't even like, I mean, in a way, you can call it shadow work, which is super important, and I don't think discussed nearly enough. We embrace those parts of ourselves that we're typically told to let go of. They actually begin to lose their power. So think about, in a very physical sense, if there is a shadow of something in a physical world, well, what do? If we turn the light on, the shadow dissipates, right? The same is true with shadow work. When we shine a light of love and witnessing these parts of ourselves on those, we shine the lights onto those parts of ourselves, they begin to lose their energy because we're not fighting them anymore, right? What we fight tends to get more energy. When we get angry at something, I fought back pain for 2 decades. Went to practitioner after practitioner, tried to get rid of it. And finally, when my intuitive abilities came in, I was like, wow, I'm holding responsibility in there, right? So the next question was, so how do I let it go? And I tried for years to let it go, and that didn't happen. And then I finally realized in meditation, well, that was actually making it worse. So I began to embrace it and understand it. And then I haven't had back pain in the next 2 decades, right? I didn't do any surgery. I didn't do any physical manipulation. I mean, I did a lot of chiropractic and massage and things, and those are fine. I have nothing against those, obviously. But they didn't get to the root of my issue. So for yourself, whatever you've been told to let go of, try embracing it, witnessing it with unconditional love. Watch what happens. I think it'll be very different.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Was there another hand? Teresa. And then Kashala.
Yeah, the thing that I've sort of been struggling with the last couple of days, I guess, is feeling guilty about, this lockdown is going to cause so many people so many troubles, and I don't have those troubles, right? So some people are going to become more suicidal. Suicide's going to go up. Children won't have enough food to eat. Supply chains, and this is not just here, but it's around the world, right? And I've just been feeling sort of guilty about all of that. So I used your exercise to sort of help me let go of that. I don't know that it's mine, but I do think it helped. I feel really emotional right now. But I just have been feeling like so many people are paying the price for this pandemic that don't deserve to. So people like me can be protected more or less, right? Right. It doesn't feel fair. So I'm glad we're addressing this whole global consciousness thing, because I don't know if there's other people who are it's weighing on, but it's been weighing on me.
Yeah, thank you for voicing that. I'm guessing at least a few people here have a similar thought process. And what I'm about to share is not meant to minimize your experience at all. So, and as opposed to but, and if we look at things on a big picture perspective, everyone's soul is here to experience what it needs to experience. That doesn't mean we turn a blind eye to it. It means we, ideally, I think, and people can differ, that's fine. Ideally, we use our privilege, if you will, in whatever way we can to help those. Now, we might not know how, and that's okay too. I think that's actually better, because when we admit to not knowing something, then spirit can inform us in a higher directive. But the mind, if it's trying to assuage guilt, will never work. So my invitation, and I think again, this is for more than just yourself, is to really feel in, what is my calling? Who am I to be in response to what's happening, in conscious response to what's happening, right? And not judge the guilt, because then we're judging a judgment, right? Honor the guilt. It's there to potentially catalyze something for you. And do what you can with what you have, with what you can. You know, some people, I mean, everyone's got their gifts, right? And I do teach a course on life mission every about 6 weeks or so. It's just like an hour. And even if it's not big mission, it's an opportunity to get clearer on exactly this, on what we can do and how we can be in response to what's happening. And that's what I would say to that. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for bringing your emotional body here too. I love that. Okay. It's so real and authentic. It's just like it's the best thing ever for me. Thank you. Kashala, you had your hand up before?
Yeah. I just am full of sadness. That's about all I can say. It just feels overwhelming.
Thank you for sharing that. The mind often goes to a place, says, what do I do with this sadness? It doesn't feel good. And the mind will often come up with a plan. And it may be a good
gratitude, be great. I practice gratitude, but
sure, not at the expense of the grief, because sometimes that's the mind distracting away from the feeling. If I can change the feeling with what I'm thinking, I get the logic of that and I get the excitement of that, but I also have an issue because I've seen so many people have so many blockages from repressed grief because they did just that. They pushed it down and changed the thought. Oh, if I just think about this, right? If we actually have gratitude for the grief, then we can actually go into it. And I'll share this too. When we do the healing work, especially when it's our own energy, the more open we are to it, the quicker the healing. The more open we are to having an experience of what's actually in our bodies already, the less painful the release. I'm going to give an example. and I'm going to apologize in advance if it sounds disgusting to people, but it is just part of real life, okay? So if you or anyone were to eat something that was poisonous, for example, not like arsenic kind of thing, but spoiled food maybe. Well, going down, it feels fine, right? And at some point, your body says, no, this is not going to go any further in me, right? So what does it do? You throw up, right? Even with like over alcohol, right? You throw up and get it out. It doesn't feel good on the way out, does it? Nowhere near as good as it did going down, okay? That's just fact. And yet we feel better after it comes out, right? So if we can be with that brief discomfort relative often to what's actually there and allow it to flow through us with less judgment and place of love, not just from ourselves, but someone working with you. And I alluded to this earlier. I don't think we can really access those deep levels of sadness and fear and anxiety and whatever it is on our own. We need a safe container. So if that safe container can be held and allow you to access those layers, allow you to experience what's there, and really to not judge it. And for yourself and everyone else that this resonates with, to not judge it either, we can actually work through it much quicker with less pain. Willingness, this is a line from one of my mentors. I just like to say that when it's not something that I came up with. He said, willingness is the cosmic grease of healing. And it was really, I don't know if I understood it at the moment, but I do now. That willingness to have the experience of what's there. But if you think about it, if it's in your body, it's there already. So why not make friends with it, right? We often are taught to push it down, and that's where the blockages happen. And, that's never a positive thing. So part of our learning, which leads to healing, as we said earlier, is learning to be okay with those emotions that we were taught to not be okay with. That's on them. We don't have to carry that into our experience any longer. We don't have to judge other people's experience of that. We can actually open and I think it would be a much more peaceful, loving world if we were able to love even those parts of ourselves that we're taught are not good or not cute or not welcomed. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And I also get that it can be overwhelming. That's one of the reasons why I recommend a safe container with a quality practitioner, someone that you trust that can hold the space. Okay?
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Val has a question. You need to unmute. Well, you know that already.
Yes, just as it was really good to do both of the exercises, even though a lot of us have read or done them before, which I also did standing up, just as that was good and like, oh, hey, yeah, I've forgotten this. The thing you said you might address of not feeling full permission from the collective. It doesn't feel like a crisis. I know you have an answer, but it feels like it would be good to go over that answer for me again.
Sure, no problem at all. And ironically or not, I was just guided to Sam's question, which says, what happens when they refuse to give permission? Just as you started beginning to speak. So it's like we're all on the same page. How wonderful. Part of the reason for asking permission is so that the process goes more smoothly and that we can learn through experience. When we don't get permission, it can be a number of things. I'll touch upon maybe a couple of them here. One can be a concern of, can the other person or persons handle it? Which is a reflection on over responsibility within ourselves. So we use the process as almost a diagnostic tool as far as what's going on within ourselves, right? And if that's the case, then we work with that. It's just I call it a detour, right? Like if you're driving down a road and you see a detour sign, you might get a little upset, but you know you're gonna get to where you need to go. It's just gonna take a little bit longer. So without the straight line, you're just kind of going a roundabout. So that detour, for example, it would be working with that sense of over-responsibility. Right? There's also a couple other factors that could be in there, but I'm just going to touch upon that for now. And the other one, and this might be something that might be resonant for at least some of you, is this question. It's going to get a little deep, so bear with me here. Not that this group is opposed to that, but the question of who will I be without this? In other words, who will I be without carrying, I'll just use an example, my mother's grief. Because we have an identification and an attachment to being who we've been, because that's who we've been or how we've been to get love, we want to continue to do that. But in many cases, it's not in the best interest for you and the other persons as well. So the question, who will you be without it? And this part's kind of funky. Some of us don't know the answer to that. And that's totally okay. Like we said earlier, if you don't know the answer, it creates space to be informed. Because very simply, a lot of us don't have that experience. We don't have that experience of not being who we've been, right? Some of us have been this for decades. So it can be a little scary, in which case we work with it a little bit differently, somewhat like dipping your toe in the pool to see if the temperature is okay. We do a little bit, get you uncomfortable and get you comfortable and acclimated to that, and then go deeper and then go deeper. Next thing you know, you're fully in the pool. Great questions, and again, there's more to that. But the thing I really love about this particular system that really came to me, I can't say I invented it, it really came to me, is that there is some place to go with any form of resistance or blockage or detour or whatever it is. And if I'm tuned in well, I'm going to hear exactly where that is. And a lot of times I'll hear new things in a session. You know, I work by phone and by Zoom. And I used to work in person, but we'll hope for that again to happen once again. This is a big part of the work, is taking it to that deeper step and opening to that possibility that I don't know who I'm going to be because I haven't had that experience, but I'm willing to step into it. And sometimes just that willingness, like we said earlier, it's the cosmic release of healing. That willingness allows, and then we check in with that other person or persons, and then amazingly, their higher self will say, yes, please give it back to me. So when we do our work, it creates the opening, and their higher selves are a reflection of what's going on within ourselves. So as one person's like, okay, like it took us a second to take that in. That's great. Okay. What we see in that visualization, again, that's why we do the process, as a reflection of what's going on within ourselves. That's why we do the work. Because sure, we can easily say, oh, of course their higher self is going to want it back. I know that. That's a mental game. And you can do that if that's your thing. In my experience, that's not where the deeper healing is. Right? It could be part of it, sure. But the deeper healing goes into this, and you know, this, for me, for these concepts and ideas and tools. So hopefully I explain that okay. Okay, from Val and Sam, where are they? There you are. Okay, can I get an amen or a thumbs up? Okay, cool. Awesome, thank you. Or an a women, as it might be, as it were. I'm feeling pretty complete. I don't want to speak for all of you, but I'm just listening in spirit, and spirit's like, okay, we got it. Okay. So just real briefly, thank you, Sam. My website is my name, davemarkowitz.com. Pretty much everything you need is going to be there, including a frequently asked questions section on the private sessions page. You can order the book or books from there. If this material resonated with you the most, I'm going to recommend the most recent book, which is called Empathopedia. I think Teresa and others might have the one prior to that, which is called Self-Care for the Self-Aware, which is wonderful in and of itself. It's shorter, it's an easier read, and for many, it's a good introduction to these concepts. Empathopedia takes it a few steps further. So feel into yourself, see which one feels more accurate for you. A lot of people I've worked with tend to get Empathopedia for themselves, and then Self-Care for the Self-Aware for others who they feel are just kind of blossoming into the awareness of being empathic and highly sensitive. I also do group work, so anywhere between 1 and 2 times a week, I have a group that will get anywhere between 15 and 30, 40 people. I know that for a lot of us, we get Zoom fatigue. We don't want to do more groups, so we do our best to maintain the energy of just within yourself. And if you use the keyhole that we learned early on, seems like a long time ago, you should be fine. And each one of those have a different concept. So for example, healing fear, healing anxiousness, or healing grief, life mission we mentioned earlier. There's a lot of different things. So on the website, go to the groups page, and you can see all those opportunities, and they're really cost effective. I'm not here to, you know, buy 90 Rolls Royces. It's okay. I just watched the Osho documentary, so it's just on my mind. I'm here to share my gifts, so I make that as available as possible. One of my friends literally charges $1,000 an hour, and he told me straight up, he said, we do the same thing, you could charge that too. And I said, yeah, I probably could, but I don't feel right doing that, because a lot of people I work with have already spent thousands upon thousands trying to find answers. It just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel aligned with me. I know I can get that. It's just not where I'm at right now. So it's way, way less expensive. And there's a lot of available discounts, especially with COVID, because some of us, you know, can't work. So there's discounts available. And you can see all that on the website. Okay, so.
Anybody have any last thoughts? Well, I gotta say, this is just wonderful. It was timely. I'm so happy that you agreed to come on, and I think a lot of people will be helped.
Thanks.
Yeah, and we will make it available to people to watch on our website, which doesn't get a lot of traffic, but it will be there for the people that need it.
Exactly. If they need it, they'll find it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank
good,
you,
Dave.
Dave.
Thank you again. Until next time, be well. Everybody here, be well. You know, treat yourself well. And we'll see you in a month.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.